After the truth is spoken, the world never sounds the same again, because truth doesn't just reveal what's been hiding, it reveals who we've become while we were trying to survive it. And for some wounds, the hardest part isn't the pain, it's the silence that follows. This is Unforgiven, Part 4. The Testimony in the Dark, a story about a man learning to carry his own truth, a mother learning to forgive her own past, and the quiet after the fire where healing finally begins. Morning always came too early to the Blake house. It didn't matter whether the night had been filled with storms or silence. The sun always rose like it had something to prove. Margaret Blake didn't notice it anymore. She moved through her kitchen with the slow, trembling motions of someone who had forgotten how to breathe without pain. The kettle hissed. The house creaked. The air felt heavy with the kind of grief that never leaves the walls. On the table lay the DNA report Detective Moore had shown her. Months ago, the report that destroyed her entire life in one sentence. Charles Quinn is the biological father of Ryan Blake. Margaret no longer cried when she looked at it. The tears had dried into something deeper, something quieter, a wound that pulsed instead of bled. Ryan entered the kitchen, his steps unsteady. His face looked older than his 33 years. Sleepless nights and too many regrets had carved themselves into his expression. "Morning," he muttered, though nothing about it felt like morning. Margaret placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of him, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Eat something." Ryan stared at the food, then at her. "You don't have to take care of me like this." She shook her head gently. "I'm your mother. I don't know how to stop." He exhaled, shoulders slumping. The silence between them had grown thick since he learned the truth that the man he hated most was the one who gave him life. And the mother he loved most had carried that secret alone. After what felt like hours, Ryan spoke. "Mom. Whose child was that? The boy the one Evelyn mentioned. Was he Margaret's hands tightened around her mug? She knew this moment had to come. "Yes," she whispered. "The boy wasn't yours. He was Charles Quinn's." Ryan's face hardened, then cracked. "So he ruined your life, and he ruined mine." Margaret reached across the table, her trembling fingers brushing his wrist. "No, sweetheart. He ruined himself. You and that child, you were both innocent. Innocent," Ryan repeated, looking away. Funny how that word feels like a lie in this house. Margaret wanted to say more, but every word felt like choosing the wrong door in a burning building. Instead, she whispered the only truth she still believed. "You are not him." Ryan didn't answer. He stood and grabbed his coat. I need air. Margaret watched him go, her vision blurring. Don't run from yourself, she said softly, but he was already out the door. Across town, Evelyn Hart parked her car outside Portland General Hospital, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She hadn't planned to visit Ryan today. She wasn't sure why she was here now. Some wounds didn't heal through distance. They festered in silence. She walked down the corridor, the smell of disinfectant sharp in her nose. When she reached his room, he was sitting upright on the bed, staring out the window. Ryan turned when he heard the door. Surprise flickered across his eyes, followed quickly by something harder to read. Evelyn. Hi, she said quietly. You don't have to be here. I know. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air felt cold between them, familiar but fractured. It's over, Evelyn said, voice steady. I filed the divorce paperwork this morning. Ryan blinked, but not in shock, only in resignation. I figured, and she continued, I told Attorney Howard to move forward with the charges. Embezzlement, fraud, whatever else the prosecutors find. Ryan's jaw clenched. You really want to see me locked up? I want to see the truth. Evelyn replied softly, and the truth is, you cross too many lines to pretend this marriage is something we can save. He laughed under his breath, bitter. So that's it. You're done. It's not about being done. It's about being honest. Ryan leaned back against the pillows, eyes burning. You think I don't want to be honest? You think I don't wake up every day wishing I could erase everything? I've turned into Evelyn's voice softened. Wishing isn't the same as changing. He stared at her a long, wounded stare, then looked away. I used to think, he said quietly, that loving you made me better. Turns out, it only made me realize how bad I already was. She felt that line pierce somewhere deep, but she didn't allow it to sway her. I'm not punishing you. Ryan, she said, I'm letting go. There's a difference. He swallowed hard. Tell that to my mother. Evelyn hesitated. Images of Margaret crying alone on her porch flickered through her mind. She loves you, Evelyn whispered, but love isn't a shield, not anymore. Ryan closed his eyes as if her words were too heavy to hold. When Evelyn left the hospital, she passed Attorney Howard waiting just outside. Everything ready, she asked. He nodded. The charges are filed. Ryan's testimony will influence sentencing for Quinn and his partners. But for his own crimes, he'll have to face the court. Good. Evelyn said, though the word tasted bitter, Howard studied her expression. Guilt doesn't vanish just because justice moves forward. I know. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing. Sometimes the right thing feels like hell. Evelyn smiled weakly. Hell feels familiar at this point. Back at the Blake house, Margaret stood in the doorway as two detectives stepped inside. Mrs. Blake, Detective Sanders said gently, "Is Ryan home?" Her heart dropped. He just stepped out. Why? What happened? We have a warrant, Sanders said. Charges include financial conspiracy tied to Charles Quinn. Margaret's breath hitched. Not my son. Please. Not my son. We have to take him in. Sanders replied, "He's needed for questioning." She staggered back, grasping the counter for balance. "He hasn't eaten," she whispered. Let me make him something. He gets dizzy when he's stressed." "Mrs. Blake, please," she begged, tears spilling. "Let me cook for him one last time." Sanders hesitated, then nodded. Margaret's hands shook as she boiled noodles, the steam blurring her vision. Each movement felt like a farewell. When Ryan returned and saw the officers, he froze. Margaret rushed to him, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Eat something, sweetheart," she pleaded. "Please." Ryan closed his eyes, then nodded. He sat down, ate slowly, quietly. One last meal cooked by a mother trying to hold what little she had left. When he finished, he stood and kissed her forehead. "I'll come back," he whispered. "Promise me," she cried. He didn't answer. The handcuffs clicked. The door closed, and Margaret collapsed onto the floor, alone in a house that suddenly felt 10 times colder. The rain returned the next morning, not as a storm, but as a quiet insistence. It dripped from the eaves of the Blake house, soaked the front steps, and gathered in small, trembling puddles as if the sky itself had begun to grieve. Inside, Margaret sat alone at the kitchen table, the seat across from her painfully empty. The bowl Ryan had finished the night before still sat in the sink. She couldn't bring herself to wash it. As long as the bowl remained dirty, it meant he was still here somehow, still her boy, still someone she could take care of. But the world didn't care about sentiment. It cared about consequences. The knock came at 9:17 a.m. sharp. Final. Margaret flinched. She already knew who it was. When she opened the door, Evelyn Hart stood on the porch, rain clinging to her coat, her hair slightly damp, something in her eyes, exhaustion, guilt, or both felt like a mirror of Margaret's own pain. "Margaret," Evelyn said softly, Can I come in?" Margaret hesitated. 1,000 emotions surged at once: anger, love, sorrow, gratitude. But she stepped aside. The house felt colder with Evelyn in it, as if the roles had reversed. The daughter-in-law now carried the burden once carried by the mother. "I heard about the arrest," Evelyn said, sitting across from her. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd come so soon." Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "They took him before I could tell him I forgave him." Evelyn's heart twisted. "He knows." "No," Margaret said, shaking her head. "He thinks he's alone." Evelyn leaned forward. "Then we won't let him feel that way." Margaret looked up sharply. "We," Evelyn swallowed. "Whatever Ryan did, whatever mistakes he made, he's not the only one carrying guilt. I don't hate him, Margaret. I just can't save him." Margaret's expression softened, but pain still lived in her eyes. "I know, and I don't expect you to." They sat in silence. Two women connected by the same man, one by blood, one by love, but now bound by the same grief. The rain tapped against the window like a ticking clock. "What happens next?" Margaret asked quietly. Evelyn took a breath. "There's an arraignment hearing this afternoon. They'll read the charges formally, assign a preliminary bail amount. He'll get a lawyer. After that, the investigation continues." "Will he go to prison?" Margaret's voice trembled. Evelyn didn't want to answer, but lies felt like poison now. "It depends on how much evidence they have, on whether he cooperates." Margaret nodded slowly. "He will. He's not his father." Evelyn paused. "No, he's not." The words tasted true in her mouth, surprisingly true. Across town, the police van carrying Ryan pulled up behind the Multnomah County Courthouse. The rain fell harder now, like a curtain closing over the city. He stepped out, escorted by 2 officers, wrists cuffed, his breath fogged in the cold morning air. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He didn't look back. Inside the courthouse, the fluorescent lights felt too bright, too honest. Detective Sanders walked alongside him. "You'll get your hearing soon. Just stay calm." Ryan almost laughed. Calm. The world had burned down around him, and they were asking for calm. They led him down a hallway toward a holding. As he walked, he felt eyes on him. Judges, clerks, strangers passing through. Some recognized him. Some whispered. Some watched with detached fascination, as if he were a scene in a movie, not a man whose life was unraveling, one brutal thread at a time. When they finally placed him in the holding room, he sat on the metal bench, stared at his cuffed hands, and forced himself to breathe. He didn't know if he feared the future or remembered the past. both hurt the same. At noon, Evelyn and Margaret arrived at the courthouse. Margaret clutched her handbag tightly, her hands trembling. The hallway buzzed with murmurs, lawyers pacing, officers moving briskly. But Margaret seemed to notice none of it. Her entire world was behind one of the metal doors ahead. They reached the viewing corridor just as Ryan was escorted inside the courtroom. When he turned and saw them through the glass window, his mother, small and fragile, Evelyn, steady but sorrowful. Something broke in his expression. He felt it crack like a bone. Margaret pressed her hand against the glass. Ryan didn't reach back, but his eyes softened, and that was enough. The hearing was brief. The judge read the charges: fraudulent misappropriation of corporate assets, complicity in identity, manipulation tied to Charles Quinn, obstruction of justice. Margaret flinched with each word, as if they were blows landing on her own skin. Bail was set impossibly high. The court adjourned. Ryan was escorted out, and Margaret felt as if someone had carved the air out of her lungs. Afterward, they stepped outside into the drizzle. The sky was a bleak sheet of gray. Evelyn turned to Margaret. Attorney Howard can take the case. He's expensive, but he's fair, and he knows the system. Margaret nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. Evelyn hesitated, then said, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I'm here for both of you. Margaret looked at her with a gratitude so raw it nearly broke Evelyn's composure. You loved him, Margaret whispered. I can see it still hurts. It does, Evelyn said, but hurt isn't the same as hate. They stood there for a moment, two women in the rain, bound not by bitterness, but by the desire to protect a man who had hurt them both in different ways. Finally, Margaret whispered, he needs to see you. Evelyn froze. Margaret, you're the only person who can make him understand who he still is. Evelyn closed her eyes. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Margaret took her hand. Her voice was soft but unwavering. No, dear. You're strong because you're hurting. Go to him before guilt becomes the only thing he has left. Evelyn looked up in the courthouse behind them. Through its stone walls, she imagined Ryan sitting alone in a cell, weighed down by a lifetime he didn't choose. She inhaled sharply. Some collisions were unavoidable. This was one of them. She turned toward Margaret and nodded. I'll go. And for the first time since the past came crashing back, Margaret smiled, not with joy, but with the quiet relief of someone who finally saw a path through the dark. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time Evelyn reached the Multnomah detention wing, a narrow concrete annex behind the courthouse, where the walls smelled faintly of metal, bleach, and regret. A guard scanned her ID, motioning her forward. "You have 10 minutes," he said. "No touching, no raised voices. I'm not here to yell." Evelyn replied. He gave her a knowing look. Everyone says that, but Evelyn wasn't everyone. Not anymore. The visitation room was small, square, quiet. A single glass partition divided the space. 2 chairs, 2 telephones. Enough distance to stay safe. Enough proximity to break someone open. Ryan was already seated on the other side. His wrists were free now, but faint red pressure marks still ringed them. His eyes looked exhausted, bruised not from violence, but from the weight of being awake too long with thoughts he didn't know how to survive. When he saw Evelyn, something sharp flickered in him. Shame, yearning, fear, all tangled together. She sat, lifted the phone to her ear. He did the same, hesitating as though the handset weighed more than he could hold. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Evelyn's voice was calm. "Your mother asked me to come." He let out a hollow, humorless exhale. "Of course she did. You know she's terrified for you," Evelyn said. "She should be," he replied. His voice cracked on the word should. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Evelyn studied him, the slope of his shoulders, the tremble in his jaw. He looked like a man standing on the ruins of a life he helped destroy, but never meant to. "You're Ryan Blake," she said softly, "not your father's shadow." He gave a broken laugh. "My father? You mean the man who raped my mother and built an empire on the bones of everyone he touched? The man who I tried to impress for years without even knowing why." Pain rose in his eyes like a tide. "I have his blood," he whispered. "Do you know what that feels like?" Evelyn, to look in the mirror and realize the monster you hate most is the one who built you. Evelyn leaned closer to the glass, her voice gentle but firm. "Blood doesn't make you who you are. Choices do. And I made all the wrong ones. Then start making the right ones now." Ryan's eyes filled not with tears, but with something heavier. "Evelyn," he said, "if you testify, if you speak against me, I won't survive that." She inhaled sharply. "I didn't come here to talk about testifying." He froze. "Then why did you come?" Evelyn swallowed. Her voice dropped into something quieter, more dangerous, more honest. "To ask if you're ready to tell the truth." Ryan's face tightened. "Truth doesn't save me." "No," she said, "it saves you from yourself." He looked away, jaw clenched. "What do you want me to say? That I moved money? Fine, I did. That I kept secrets. Yeah, I did. That I let Charles control parts of my life. I did that too. He turned back to her, raw and shaking. But I never meant to hurt you. For the first time. Evelyn felt her throat burn. I know, she whispered, but intentions don't erase consequences. The words hit him like a blow. He closed his eyes, forehead leaning against the glass. I wish I could go back, fix things, choose differently. You can't, Evelyn said. But you can choose now. Choose what he asked. What's left? She held his gaze. To testify. He shook his head violently. No, they'll tear me apart. The moment I stand against Charles. I'm done. You're already done, she said softly, unless you choose something else to become. He stared at her through the glass eyes haunted, like a man caught between drowning and reaching for a rope he wasn't sure he deserved. You think testifying makes me a better man? He asked. No, Evelyn said. I think it makes you an honest one. Silence stretched between them, heavy as a confession. Then Ryan's voice dropped to a whisper. He ruined everything. Evelyn nodded. Then stop letting him ruin you. He looked down at his hands. Hands that had lied, hidden, constructed the life he thought he needed, only to tear it all apart. Finally, he said, if I testify, everything becomes public. Yes, they'll know what he did to my mother. Yes, they'll know what I did to you. Yes, he swallowed, and you'll have to witness all of it. You won't be alone, she said. His eyes lifted, searching hers. Why are you doing this? Evelyn breathed in slowly, and in that moment, she answered a question she had been asking herself since the night he staggered into her house. Bleeding, broken, begging for something she couldn't give. Because I don't want you to drown in a truth you never chose. Ryan's voice cracked. I don't deserve that kind of mercy. Her fingers pressed against the glass, an instinctive, impossible gesture. And your mother doesn't deserve to bury the son she spent her whole life trying to save. Those words broke something open in him. He pressed his hand to the glass, mirroring hers on the other side, not touching, but close enough to remember what touch once meant. His voice was barely audible. I'll testify. Evelyn exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Relief, grief, and something like mourning tangled together. But then Ryan added quietly, on one condition. What condition, she asked. That you be there when I speak. He paused. When I finally say out loud what I've been running from all my life. Evelyn closed her eyes. It hurt more than she expected. When she opened them, She nodded. "I'll be there." The guard stepped forward, tapping the glass. Time was up. Ryan looked at her one last time, and she saw it, the beginning of a man finally facing himself. As he stood, he whispered into the phone, "Thank you for not letting me become him." He hung up. The guard cuffed him, and Ryan walked away, not lighter, not freer, but clearer. Evelyn remained seated long after he was gone, because speaking the truth has a price, but some lies cost far more. The file sat on Evelyn's desk long after her meeting with Ryan had ended. A thin manila folder, a single photograph inside, a truth heavy enough to bend the air around it. She hadn't opened the folder again since Mr. Trent first handed it to her weeks ago. But today, something in her chest, maybe duty, maybe love, maybe a quiet dread, told her she no longer had the luxury of avoiding it. She slid the photograph out. It showed a boy, no older than 7 or 8, standing barefoot in a dusty Louisiana backyard. His shirt was torn, his face smeared with mud, but his eyes, those eyes were unmistakable, a sharp gray blue, the color of storm skies and inherited sins. The boy was Charles Quinn's child, a child conceived through violence, a child Charles never claimed, a child who, at the time Margaret told her story, Evelyn thought had died, except the dates didn't line up. Not anymore. Evelyn stared at the image. Her heart hammered. The boy wasn't dead. The boy was Ryan. The resemblance, now obvious, now cruel, punched through her. That small, frightened boy, standing alone in the photograph, hadn't just survived Charles Quinn. He had been raised by the woman Charles destroyed. He had grown up thinking his father was a ghost, when in reality, the ghost had been hunting him all along. And now that boy sat behind bars for sins that weren't entirely his. Evelyn closed her eyes. A soft knock pulled her back. Ethan stepped into the office, rain-speckled and tired. "You're still here. I needed to see this," Evelyn said, holding up the photograph. He approached, brow furrowing. "That's the one Margaret gave the detective." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "It's more than that. Look at the boy's face." Ethan leaned in and froze. "Oh God." His voice fell. "It's him." Evelyn swallowed hard. Ryan thinks he inherited the worst parts of Charles, but the truth is, he inherited the best parts of Margaret. And the world punished him for the blood he never chose. Ethan murmured. They both stood in silence, the weight of realization settling heavily between them. Then Ethan asked quietly, "Are you going to tell him Evelyn set the photograph down? He needs to know who he was before the world told him who to become. Later that afternoon, Evelyn drove to Margaret's house again. She found the older woman sitting on the porch, staring at the rain as if it were trying to tell her something. Margaret looked up. "Evelyn, I didn't think you'd come back today." Evelyn sat beside her. "We need to talk." Margaret stiffened. "About Ryan?" "No." Evelyn handed her the photo. "About before Ryan." Margaret's eyes trembled as she recognized the picture. "Where did you get this?" "It was in my father's archive. I think he was trying to protect you back then, maybe even protect the boy." Margaret pressed the photo against her chest, tears spilling before she could stop them. "He was so small," she whispered, "so scared. He never spoke for weeks after what happened to me. I tried to take him to a shelter, but they were full. I tried to file a statement, but they said without a signed witness, it would go nowhere." Her hands trembled, and then, one day, we ran as far as we could. "To Oregon," Evelyn said gently. "To start over," Margaret whispered. "To give him a life that wasn't built on that man's violence." Evelyn took a slow breath. "Margaret, does Ryan know who he used to be?" "No." Her voice cracked. "I buried that version of him. I let him be reborn in a place where no one knew his father's name. Then he deserves to know now," Evelyn said softly, "because the truth isn't just pain, it's context." Margaret nodded. "You're right. He's strong enough now. Stronger than I ever was." Evelyn reached for her hand. "Margaret, you were strong enough to survive. That's more than most." A long silence settled before Margaret whispered, "Will you come with me when I tell him?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Of course." The next day, they went together. Detective Sanders coordinated a private visitation room. No glass wall this time, no phones, just 3 chairs, one truth. When Ryan walked in, his bruised face softened at the sight of his mother, then hardened again when he realized Evelyn was there too. "Another intervention," he said, sitting heavily. "I'm running out of ways to apologize." Margaret shook her head. "This isn't about apologies, Ryan. It's about what you deserve to know." She handed him the photograph. Ryan stared at it. His hand shook. "Who is this you?" Margaret said. Ryan looked up sharply. "Mom, what?" "That was before Oregon," Margaret whispered. "Before the name Blake. Before I ran. Before I tried to give you a life that wasn't built on a man's violence." Ryan blinked, throat tightening. I don't remember this. You were too young," she said, "and I wiped everything clean because I thought erasing pain was the same as protecting you." Ryan's eyes glassed over. Why didn't you tell me? Margaret struggled for breath. Because I was afraid you'd see yourself as broken, or tainted, or destined to be like him. Tears spilled down Ryan's cheeks. I already did, he whispered. Evelyn leaned forward. Ryan, look at me. He did. Barely. You weren't born from his cruelty, she said. You were born from your mother's survival, from her strength, from love so fierce she ran across the country to save you. Ryan bowed his head, sobbing silently. Margaret reached for him, pulling him into her arms, not as a man she feared losing, but as the boy she had once carried through every mile of that escape. I'm sorry, she whispered into his hair. I'm sorry for the lies, but you were a child of hope, Ryan, not of shame. Ryan held on to her like drowning and breathing at the same time. Evelyn watched them mother and son, pain and truth, wound and healing, and felt something shift inside her, not forgiveness. Not yet, but understanding, and maybe that was its own mercy. When Ryan finally lifted his head, he wiped his eyes and whispered, then maybe I can start again. Margaret cupped his face. Yes, sweetheart, you can. He turned to Evelyn next. Will you stay while I figure out who I really am? Evelyn exhaled. I'll be here, as long as it helps you walk forward, not backward. And for the first time in years, Ryan Blake boy, man, son, survivor, allowed himself to believe the world still had room for him, not as the shadow of Charles Quinn, but as the child in the photograph, the one who lived. The courthouse felt different on the morning of the hearing, not colder, not warmer, just heavier, like every wall had been listening to secrets for decades, and today, finally, it expected someone to speak them aloud. Evelyn arrived early. She stood at the foot of the marble steps, staring at the wide doors that had swallowed so many lives before this one. A thin fog drifted over Portland, the kind that blurred the edges of everything, as if the city itself wasn't sure it wanted to witness what was coming. Inside, reporters were already gathering, murmuring like restless birds. Quinn trial update. Blake expected to testify. Corporate conspiracy unraveling. The truth was no longer hiding. It was circling. Ryan Blake was escorted through the back entrance, his wrists uncuffed for the first time since his arrest. He wore a simple gray shirt, his hair still damp from the morning shower in the detention center. He looked sober, not of alcohol, but of reality. Detective Sanders walked beside him. You ready for this? He asked. Ryan didn't answer at first. Then I don't know if ready is the word. But I'm here. That's enough, Sanders said, but Ryan wasn't sure. When they reached the waiting room, he looked up to see Margaret and Evelyn already there. Margaret stood immediately, reaching out with both hands. Sweetheart Ryan pulled her into a gentle embrace. Thanks for coming. Evelyn stepped closer. Their eyes met, holding everything unspoken between them. He whispered, "You stayed." She nodded. "I promised I would." And for a moment, just a moment, Ryan looked like the boy in the photograph, again frightened, trying, desperate for someone to tell him he wasn't doomed by the blood he carried. The judge took his seat. Attorneys rustled papers. The gallery filled with strangers who came to watch a man choose between silence and salvation. When Ryan was brought to the witness stand, he felt the courtroom stare land on him like a weight. He inhaled, long and slow. The oath was recited, the Bible closed, silence settled. Attorney Howard stepped forward. "Mr. Blake, please state your full name for the record." Ryan swallowed. "Ryan Hale Blake. Hale." Evelyn thought. His mother's name, his first truth. Howard nodded. "Mr. Blake, today you will testify regarding the actions of Charles Quinn, also known as Henry Vaughn. Do you understand the gravity of this testimony?" "Yes." "And you are aware that speaking the truth here may also incriminate you?" A murmur rippled through the gallery. Ryan straightened. "Yes, I'm aware." Evelyn didn't realize she was holding her breath until she felt her hands shaking. Howard paced slowly. "Tell us when you first became involved with Mr. Quinn's financial activities." Ryan stared at his hands that had signed fraudulent papers, executed Quinn's commands, carved harm into others' lives. "I was 26, he began. Charles took me under his wing. I thought he saw potential in me. I didn't know he saw usefulness." "What do you mean by usefulness?" Ryan exhaled. He used me in deals that weren't legitimate. He showed me how to hide assets, shift numbers, create ghost accounts. At first, I believed it was temporary, something we'd fix later. Was it fixed? No. He forced himself to look up. I made it worse. Margaret let out a soft sob. Evelyn squeezed her hand. Howard continued. "Did Mr. Quinn ever threaten you?" "Yes." Ryan answered immediately. He used words like family duty. He said I'd betray the company if I didn't obey. And later, Howard pressed. Ryan hesitated. His voice dropped. "Later he threatened my mother." Gasps scattered through the room. Judge Thompson lifted his chin. "Let the record reflect the witness has stated. Mr. Quinn used coercion involving the safety of a family member. Howard nodded grimly. Go on, Mr. Blake. When I tried to pull away, he reminded me that I owed him everything, that without him, I'd be nothing. Ryan's voice cracked. I believed him. Why Ryan paused, then whispered the truth that had lived in his bones for years. Because I didn't know he was my father. The room erupted whispers, shock, reporters scribbling furiously. Judge Thompson raised a hand. Order. Howard steadied himself. Mr. Blake, how did learning this information affect your actions? Ryan's eyes flickered towards Margaret, then toward Evelyn. It broke me. Every decision I'd made, every mistake, every person I hurt. His voice trembled. I thought it all meant I was destined to become him. Evelyn's eyes filled. Howard stepped back. No further questions. The defense approached like a wolf circling an injured animal. Mr. Blake, the defense attorney began, isn't it true that you willingly participated in multiple fraudulent transactions? Yes. And isn't it true that you personally benefited from those transactions? Yes. Margaret covered her mouth. And isn't it true that you are now testifying in hopes of a reduced sentence? Ryan swallowed. I don't expect a reduced sentence. No, he repeated firmly. I expect consequences. The room grew still. The attorney raised an eyebrow. So you admit you committed crimes of your own volition? I admit I committed crimes, Ryan said, but not of my own volition. I committed them because I was young, naive, manipulated, and terrified, none of which excuse what I did. But they explain it. The attorney opened his mouth. Ryan cut him off. And I'm done hiding behind excuses. I'm here to tell the truth. If that truth condemns me, fine, but it will also condemn him. Evelyn felt her chest ache, not with pain, but pride. Judge Thompson leaned forward. Let the record show. The witness has acknowledged personal culpability while providing material testimony to the prosecution. Ryan stepped down from the stand. His knees almost buckled. Evelyn caught his arm before anyone else could. You did it, she whispered. Ryan shook his head. No, I just finally told the truth. And that, Evelyn said softly, is everything. When the courtroom emptied, Margaret held her son tightly, sobbing into his shoulder. My brave boy, she whispered. My brave, broken boy. Ryan kissed the top of her head. I'm trying. Mom, you're doing more than trying, Evelyn said, stepping beside them. You're choosing. Ryan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. Was it enough? He asked. Evelyn's eyes softened. It was the first step. and the next. You walk through whatever comes, she said, and you don't walk alone. Ryan's breath shuddered. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, truth finally began to heal, and somewhere far away, in a prison cell, Charles Quinn felt something he had never felt before: fear, not of the law, but of a son he no longer controlled. The day after the trial, Portland felt unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful, just paused, like the city was holding its breath, waiting for the consequences to finally settle. Rain clouds hovered, but did not release. The air was thick, charged, as if truth itself had altered the weather. Evelyn Hart walked through the gray courtyard outside the courthouse. She had returned not for another hearing, but because silence felt too loud in her apartment. The echoes of Ryan's testimony still wrapped around her like a bruise she couldn't stop pressing. A voice called her name. She turned. Margaret Blake approached slowly, bundled in her thick cardigan. Her steps were unsteady, but her eyes, though exhausted, carried a fragile clarity. "Evelyn," she said softly, "the judge is delivering the pre-sentencing hearing for Ryan today. They're calling it a status session, but it's the beginning of the end." Evelyn finished gently. Margaret nodded. "Would you come with me?" "Of course." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Thank you." The pre-sentencing chamber was smaller than the courtroom, more intimate, more suffocating. Only a few benches, a single judge, 2 officers, no reporters, no flashes, no crowd hungry for drama. When they entered, Ryan was already seated at the defendant's table, hands clasped, eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. He looked calmer today, but weary in a deeper way, the kind of exhaustion born not of fear, but of surrender. When he noticed them walk in, a faint relief flickered across his face. Evelyn sat behind him. Margaret sat beside her. It felt like a circle, the kind drawn not for comfort, but for protection. Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses. His tone was measured, stern, but not unkind. "Mr. Blake, this is not a sentencing," he said. "However, we must evaluate your status following yesterday's testimony." Ryan stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge continued. "Your cooperation was substantial. Your testimony clarified multiple points in the Quinn investigation. Still, you remain under charges that carry significant penalties." Ryan nodded once. "I understand. Your defense team has submitted psychological evaluations. They indicate long-term emotional manipulation and coercion by Mr. Quinn. While this does not excuse your actions." Judge Thompson paused. his gaze softening slightly. It provides context. Margaret inhaled sharply. Evelyn shut her eyes. Ryan didn't move, didn't blink. The judge continued. The prosecution has requested additional time to restructure their case in light of your testimony. This requires you to remain in state custody. I am ready to accept whatever comes, Ryan said quietly. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The judge leaned back. Mr. Blake, are you aware that your testimony may very well have saved lives, including your own? Ryan's voice cracked. Then I'm grateful. We adjourn until the formal sentencing date. Judge Thompson concluded. Officer, escort the defendant. The gavel fell with a soft, echoing finality. Ryan didn't look at anyone as the officers approached, but when Evelyn whispered his name, he stopped mid-step. He turned, not with hope, not with despair, but with something steadier, acceptance. Ryan, she said gently, whatever happens, you spoke the truth. You faced it. He swallowed. I only did it because you were there. Margaret stood, gripping his arm. You did it because you're better than the man who hurt us. Ryan's eyes softened. I'm trying. Mom. Margaret brushed his cheek. You don't have to try alone. The officer cleared his throat. We need to go. Ryan nodded. I'll see you soon. He let them take him again. This time, he didn't look like he was being dragged away. He looked like someone walking into responsibility with his own 2 feet. Outside the courthouse, the air finally broke. A thin drizzle began to fall, gentle, almost merciful. Margaret and Evelyn walked together under a single umbrella. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Margaret said, Do you know what scares me most? Evelyn looked at her. What? That I raised him wrong, that I raised him weak. Her voice trembled. That every time I tried to protect him, I actually made him easier to break. Evelyn stopped walking. Margaret, look at me. The older woman did. You raised him into a man who told the truth even when it destroyed him. Evelyn said, That's not weakness, that's courage. Margaret's eyes filled. I just want him to live. He will. Evelyn said, Because he wants to now. Margaret exhaled shakily and squeezed her arm. Will you tell him something for me? She asked. I can. Evelyn said, But I think you should. I will. Margaret replied, After I find the strength, you already have it. That afternoon, Evelyn visited Ryan in the holding facility, a small room this time, not a glass wall, just a table, just 2 chairs, just truth. He looked up as she entered. A faint smile ghosted across his face. You came, he said. I told Margaret I would. Ryan leaned back, studying her. "You're tired. So are you," she replied. He nodded. "But it's a good kind of tired, the kind you get after you stop running." Evelyn sat down. The judge was fair. He was. Ryan agreed. But fairness doesn't erase guilt. "No," she said, "but it gives you the chance to rebuild." He hesitated. "Do you think I deserve that chance?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "But the question is, do you think you deserve it?" Ryan looked at her for a long, long moment. Then, with a voice that trembled just enough to be human, he said, "I'm learning to." Evelyn smiled softly. "Good." "What happens now?" Ryan asked. "You face yourself," she said. "And when sentencing comes, you walk into it with the truth as your companion, not your enemy." He nodded slowly. "It's strange," he murmured. "All my life I thought silence protected me. Now I realize silence was my sentence." Evelyn reached forward, resting her hand on his for a brief, steady moment. "Then break it," she said. "Every single day." Ryan closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't look haunted. He looked free. Not legally, not completely, but spiritually. The sentence of silence had ended, and a new kind of sentence, one he chose for himself, had begun. Honesty, responsibility, rebirth. As the guard stepped in to escort him back, Ryan whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, even when I didn't deserve to be seen." Evelyn's voice was soft but certain. "You always did." And as he disappeared behind the gray metal door, Evelyn finally understood. Some prisoners lose their freedom, but others reclaim it for the first time. Morning rose slowly over Portland, as if the sun itself was reluctant to touch the city after everything it had witnessed. The storm clouds from the day before had dissolved, leaving behind a pale sky washed in silver. A kind of stillness lingered, not emptiness, but something gentler, something earned. Inside the Blake house, Margaret stood in the kitchen, watching steam rise from the kettle. Her hands moved with quiet purpose, though her thoughts drifted constantly to the detention center across town. She could almost hear Ryan's voice from yesterday, fragile, steady, honest. She placed 2 mugs on the table, one for herself, one out of habit, when a soft knock echoed through the hallway. She froze. Her heart jumped, irrational hope flashing so quickly it hurt. It wasn't Ryan. She knew that before she even opened the door. It was Evelyn. She stood on the porch, wearing a gray coat, her hair pulled into a loose tie, her expression tired but warm. Margaret, Evelyn said softly, I hope I'm not coming too early. Margaret shook her head. You're always welcome. Come in. They walked into the kitchen, where the kettle whistled its lonely tune. Margaret poured tea into both mugs and sat across from her. For a moment, neither woman spoke. They simply breathed in the silence, not a tense silence, but one that held mutual understanding. How are you? Evelyn finally asked. Margaret let out a breath. I don't know. Relieved. Maybe. Scared. Proud. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Mothers can feel 10 things at once. Evelyn smiled gently. So can ex-wives. Margaret laughed, a small, broken sound that still managed to warm the room. I suppose we're both part of his circle. We are, Evelyn said. Maybe the only circle that truly ever knew him. Margaret nodded. He's always been a boy searching for a home, even when he didn't know it. Evelyn hesitated. Margaret, will you go to the sentencing? Yes, Margaret said firmly. He needs to see someone he loves in that room. Evelyn lowered her eyes. So do you. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You'll be there too. The question was soft, vulnerable. Evelyn inhaled, then nodded. I think he needs to know he isn't alone. Not anymore. Margaret's eyes glistened. Then I won't be alone either. Later that afternoon, Evelyn drove to the Oregon coastline, the same quiet town where Ryan and Margaret had lived after the attack in Part 3. She hadn't planned to come, but something inside her had been tugging her back to the place where Ryan first started healing. The place where Evelyn had first understood forgiveness didn't have to mean forgetting. The shore was empty. The sand was damp, dotted with seaweed and driftwood. The waves rolled in slow, steady breaths. She walked toward the water until the cold tide touched her shoes. Somewhere behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. It wasn't Ryan. It was Mr. Trent. His appearance startled her, his familiar trench coat flapping lightly in the sea breeze. His posture slightly leaning on a wooden cane. Mr. Trent, she said. I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to be here, he said with a faint smile. But men like me rarely know where they're headed. We just follow the regrets. Evelyn studied him. You look tired. I am, he said. Your father would have scolded me for slowing down like this. Evelyn smiled softly. My father would have said you're working too hard. He always did. Trent chuckled. He came to stand beside her, watching the waves roll in. You were in court yesterday, she said. Of course. He adjusted his scarf. I've watched that boy self-destruct for years. It felt right to finally watch him stand. Evelyn's throat tightened. He was brave. No, Trent said. He was honest. There's a difference. Honesty wounds before it heals. He glanced at her. How are you holding up? Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know. I feel like part of me is still in that room, still hearing him say those things. And the other part, Trent asked. Evelyn looked out at the horizon, walking beside him, even when I shouldn't. Trent nodded approvingly. You carry more compassion than most people I've known. Your father would be proud. The words hit her harder than she expected. A tear escaped before she could catch it. Trent saw, but pretended he didn't. He let the silence speak for them. That evening, Margaret sat by her window, the photograph of young Ryan resting in her lap. She ran her fingers over the faded edges, tracing the outline of the boy who had saved her life simply by existing. Her mind drifted to the courtroom, to the weight of truth, to the strength in her son's voice when he finally broke the silence he'd lived under his entire life. She whispered a prayer, not for freedom, not for leniency, but for acceptance that whatever sentence came, it would not take from her the son she had fought every day to keep alive. The night deepened, and Margaret leaned back in her chair, eyes drifting closed. She dreamed of the boy in the photograph, barefoot, afraid, alive. In his cell, under the dim fluorescent light, Ryan sat on his bunk, holding the same photograph Evelyn had shown him in Act 4. He stared at the child he used to be, the one who had survived long before he even knew what survival meant. He whispered to the boy, I didn't protect you, but I'm trying to honor you. The boy didn't answer, but Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of shame slowly unraveling. From down the hallway, another inmate shouted something crude. Ryan didn't react. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere quieter. He reached under his mattress and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a letter. To Evelyn. He hadn't mailed it yet. He didn't know if he ever would. The letter wasn't long, but every word cost him something. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I can fix everything I broke, but I know this. You were the only thing in my life that wasn't built on a lie. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll remember me as the man who tried, not the one who failed. R. He folded it again, slid it back under the mattress, and lay down. For once, sleep came without nightmares. The next morning, Evelyn sat on the same porch where she had once watched Ryan argue with his mother. She held her own cup of tea, letting its warmth seep into her palms. The world seemed slower, not healed, Not whole, but quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after flames have died. When smoke rises in thin ribbons and the air still tastes like ashes, but life, somehow, insists on beginning again. Margaret stepped outside, wrapped in a shawl. "Thank you for coming," she said. Evelyn nodded. "He'll be okay." Margaret smiled gently. "Yes, for the first time, I think so too." They sat together in silence, watching the morning light spill over the horizon. The fire had passed. The truth had settled. And in its place, something fragile remained. A beginning, not for love, not for revenge, but for forgiveness, the quiet kind that grows slowly, like a seed that finally found soil after years of searching. Evelyn breathed in the cool morning air. "It's peaceful," she whispered. Margaret nodded. "It's the quiet after the fire." And for the first time in a long, long while, Evelyn believed her. In the end, the truth didn't free them. It simply stopped them from running. Sometimes that's enough. This was Unforgiven, Part 4, The Testimony in the Dark. A journey through guilt, grace, and the courage to speak aloud what the heart can no longer carry alone. If this story stayed with you tonight, subscribe to Calm Mind Journal, where every scar has a voice, and every voice finds its way home.